Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Thanks for joining today. Hey guys, we'll go ahead and get started. I know that there are a lot of pending questions, so we can start with questions y'all have. There's a lot of stuff we want to cover today, and we're really excited to have Jeff Hoffman joining us momentarily. So questions so far, one of the cool things happening in EWC this week is many of the companies all over the world are going to have access to the Accelerate One deliverables. Why is that? Because the first 53 countries that are going to be global pool countries are going to start getting their projects done and submitting so they can be considered for the global pool. So as we explained last week, we are going to have two different ways of being able to become a global finalist. For countries where there is a national organizer, and right now there are more than 70 national organizers all over the world who are managing the national competitions, they're going to be running pitch competitions, sometimes regionally going up to a national, sometimes just one national competition. It depends per country. But thus far, 53 countries have been named to be definitely going to the global pool, which means they are going to not do a national competition. It means there's no national organizer in their country. So we're going to be doing a big pool of a lot of those countries together and making sure that we have great representation from all over the world, just like this competition is. So I think the best way for you guys to think about it is in the 53 countries already determined as global pool countries. And Carlos, if you could post the list from the spreadsheet we have directly into the chat, you guys will be people whose companies are registered in those countries will be notified early next week, and you'll have either 2 or 3 new deliverables to do, and that shouldn't take more than a couple hours total. It's an updated pitch deck video. It is objectives and key results. We created a very simple template so that you'll be able to go straight into EWC Accelerate to help you get that done. And then either a user persona to really help us understand your customer and what you've done so far to understand your customer and create that fit. Or for some people, we're having them do a lean canvas, basically giving us the big mission and vision and plan for execution you have. So the idea stage companies will be doing that. So as you can see, we're listing the countries and you can go through, but you will receive an email. So you will be notified for sure that that is what's going to be expected of you over the next few weeks. In the meantime, I think the other cool thing that's going to be happening really soon is we've been working really hard on creating tons of wonderful country partners for content. So not only do we have amazing content partners, which we'll be announcing very soon, who run accelerators and incubators and conferences and different programs all over the world, but we've really focused on having as much as possible localized content so that if you're in Africa or different parts of Asia and you're looking to understand your regional opportunities, some of the partners that we're going to be announcing soon have incredible localized content. So wherever you are in the world, if you're interested in going into a new market or understanding your market better or the regional opportunities better, that'll be sitting there for you. So Carlos, would you do me a favor? And there seem to be a lot of questions right now concerning the countries. If you could unmute and say hi and walk them through a little bit about what the process has been. So guys, very simply to understand, our EWC team is still working on finalizing quite a few of the national partners. So there will be a second list coming out soon with a few more countries that won't have national competitions, which means they're in the global pool. But as years past have shown, India, Nigeria, many of these larger countries, China, have very, very strong national partners who do an incredible job of finding sometimes tens of thousands of applicants, narrowing them down through a series of competitions throughout the country. This year, most likely, they will be virtual competitions in a lot of places. But Carlos, if you can share a little bit of background, I think that that would be helpful for them in understanding this process, and that we will very soon be sharing more detail. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Give
totally.
me 1 minute.
No problem. Hi, everybody. So as Susan was mentioning, in this process of working through having to separate between what we're calling our global pool and then our country competition track, if your country is not listed on the list that we had posted, thus far, it is likely that there is a in-country competition that will have some sort of a national organizer, a group that is now responsible and tasked with the intake of applications for Entrepreneurship World Cup for this competition. And that organizing group will be in charge of evaluating the members of that country. As a result, I saw that some of the questions started coming in. So from India, I think someone mentioned from South Africa and from Nigeria, your countries, as of right now, it appears that you do have national organizers, meaning that there will be an organization, some kind of a group that will be working in this process to filter down to find your selected groups of companies, whether it's, one or two, however many it is, and Pakistan as well, Russia, yes. So if you are not on this list, if you do not come from any one of the countries that are on these lists for now, the assumption is that there is a national organizer that is in place that will be managing the selection process for your companies. That means whether you are idea stage, whether you are early stage, or whether you are growth stage, there will be somebody there taking care of you, making sure that you are passing through for proper consideration. Last year, I can't recall off the top of my head how many countries we had, but it was definitely a little over 40, I believe, that had country competitions just for that country. So I hope that answers the question. But as I mentioned, for now, for the people that are on that list, India, South Africa, Nigeria, Russia, Pakistan. It looks like everybody on that would be in individual country competitions.
And we'll be doing a full update shortly on the website, etc. So if you don't get an email this week, your country still may have a national competition. So look at that list right now that has been posted. If you don't see your country there, that means that there may be already a national organizer, or they're in the process of finalizing a national organizer and the timeline for competition. So there's nothing to do right now, okay? If your name isn't on the list. If your country name is on the list, you will be getting an email. You will have deliverables in your Accelerate One deliverables box right at the top right side of the screen that give you very specific deliverables to accomplish. Now, some of you may have those as well as suggested deliverables just to help give a little bit more color to your application, but only the countries that are going into the global finals, into global pool, need to complete those. And it's very, very important that you make sure you get those in on time. There will be individuals reviewing every single piece of your application and scoring it. And the only way we're going to be able to get this many applications reviewed in the amount of time we have to make sure we can stay on time for an incredible event in October is that you get them in. And just kind of reiterate, those of you in countries with a national competition, you're going to be asked to fill out potentially additional information. You may do 2, 3, 4, 5 separate live pitch events that would be run either live or virtually. You may have to have some kind of mentor or judge review on the ground. So the time to go through what may be happening in some of these larger national competitions may be a 10, 20, 30-hour commitment, not to mention practicing your pitch over and over because it's going to be a pitch competition. In the case of the global pool applicants, we're expecting you to spend 2 or 3 hours tops building out the opportunities to show us and our judges exactly what it is that you are doing, your vision, your mission, clarity around how you're going to be doing things for those idea stage companies. For the early and growth stage companies, it is all about showing big picture how you've already executed and where you're going. So you'll see with some of the templates we created, the OKRs and everything. Carlos, can you take over for me?
Yep,
Thank
sure.
you.
So on the deliverable side, all of those templates and everything will be posted in the next, I don't know, probably 24 to 48 hours. There's going to be a series of work outputs on the deliverables related to OKRs, which are objectives and key results, a business model canvas, and also our other deliverable, which is your pitch deck. Those will be posted along with some curated content in addition to a template for you to be able to follow to submit the work that would be considered for the Accelerate One global pool. Only if you are in global pool would you be required to complete those deliverables as evaluation criteria. If your country is doing a selection and a competition on its own, then that means that you would adhere to whatever your country is requesting or mandating as being the proper criteria. That being said, what we're going to be able to do in the Accelerate One process is intake all of those deliverables. You'll see them posted. If you are in country on the list that we had provided, that would be enough to advance to the next round after that selection comes in. So our goal is to be able to make sure and take care of as many individuals as possible, which is why we have templates and rubrics set up to be able to help you work purposefully in a structure and framework that fits, and then also to give you enough time to be able to take care of these deliverables. Again, there will be some variance between idea stage, early stage, and growth stage. So everything will be tagged and ready for you to see. And in that respect, I think in the next 24 to 48 hours, as I had mentioned, you will have access to those deliverables, and then just follow the steps. They're already organized. And yeah, that should be enough to be able to help us get through the next month. Back to you,
And
Susan.
thanks. And we'll have tons more information about that after we get a chance to spend time with Jeff. And as I mentioned, those of you to whom this applies, you'll be getting that email in the next few days. So just hang tight. And if you haven't heard from a national organizer and you haven't gotten that email, the assumption is that you'll probably know in the next couple of weeks. But go through those Accelerate One deliverables, see what they are. It's great practice for you to refine what you're doing anyway. And again, it gives us more color to share with the judges, so you'll be able to be as competitive and show how great what you're doing is as possible. So with no further ado, I'm so excited to introduce our dear friend, Jeff Hoffman. So Jeff actually has been engaged in entrepreneurship for decades as an inventor, a successful entrepreneur with IPOs, prolific inventor, which I hope he gets a chance to go into, because that really can't be overlooked. It really comes back to him having an eye on every single aspect of what it takes to be successful. An investor for many years and a best-selling author. So Jeff has been engaged with Gen for almost since the beginning and is the chairman of Gen Global. He's gotten involved and is running our Gen Starters initiative. And with EWC, I'm sure all of you who heard about the wonderful activities last year heard about how important it was, where he took time to spend just a bit of time to a lot of time with every single company, making sure that they understood how big the opportunity was for them in terms of networking, reach, and his mentorship. I mean, his heart knows no bounds. And he spent the last few years circling the world, meeting with entrepreneurs and understanding ecosystems from every perspective. So sorry if I made you blush, Jeff. You just are such an inspiration to all of us, and your commitment to entrepreneurship and the ecosystem knows no bounds. So take it away. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. And can you hear me clearly, Carlos, Susan?
Yep,
so
perfect.
It's not actually blushing. It's that I decided to grow a beard during coronavirus. So I look like I haven't shaved because I haven't shaved. So yeah, I would love working with you and Carlos to take questions out of the chat. I'll give a little bit of context about startups, about entrepreneurship. I spend my time really in two different areas. I spend my time with startups, and I spend my time with scale-ups. Some people have an idea, and I meet so many entrepreneurs and innovators that say, I have a great idea. I just don't know how to start or where to start. And then I meet a lot of startups, people that have launched their company, and they really want to hit that explosive growth. How do you really, really scale up? Some of the startups I was part of hit that really explosive growth. Probably the biggest one I was part of was Booking.com, is what most of you will know it as. But we were able to achieve kind of an acceleration with that, where the company grew exponentially and operates in like 190 countries now. And a lot of the startups I work with have been able to globalize or grow bigger. So over the years, I've tried to make a list of the best practices. And as Susan said, in my role at Gen, I travel around the world meeting with entrepreneurs and startups and trying to understand what works and what doesn't. So we've been able to collect a lot of best practices of the things you have to get right to scale. In fact, I've only ever written one book, and it's called Scale. It's the things you have to get right if you really want your company to grow, as well as everything we learned about starters and what it takes to launch an idea. So again, it's most important to me to use this time to answer the questions that are on your mind, but I'll start us off with just a couple of thoughts that a couple of the keys. I give a talk around the world called Keys to Success for Entrepreneurs in the startup business, and I'll just share with you a couple of those, and then we can dive deeper where you guys want to dive deeper. But I want to start with this one because it's so important, which is to solve a real problem in the world. And I want to spend a minute on that before we open up the floor. I get so many people that come to me and they have a solution that's looking for a problem. They say, look at this cool thing I built. And I say, okay, who's going to buy that? And they say, hopefully somebody will. It's your idea. You create it, you push it out in the world, and you hope someone wants to buy the thing that you're building in your startup. But here's what I noticed about all the people, especially I've been blessed enough to become friends with a lot of my sort of business heroes, people that have created really successful products. And I notice a common element. The most successful entrepreneurs and startups are the ones that start from the problem back in. Instead of from your desk pushing something out to the world, you go out in the world, you find a problem, and you come back in from the problem. You work from the problem back to the world. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples. I'll give you a really simple one, not as exciting, but my first startup. And you know, Susan and Carlos know this story. My first startup ever, and it was interesting because I was 20-something years old and unemployed at the time. So I didn't have time to mess around, right? I needed to eat, and I needed to make a living somehow. And I had left my engineering job and had no income. And I went to an airport. Instead of trying to think up something to push out and hope the world liked, I was out in the world. And most of the time when you and I stumble across a problem, let's say you have an errand to run at lunch and you go to this office and you only have an hour for lunch and it takes 2.5 hours. When you come back, what you say is, those people are horrible. They don't know what they're doing. It took me 2.5 hours and it should have only taken 30 minutes. What do? You complain about the problem. Those people are idiots. But then you go back to whatever you were working on. The most successful entrepreneurs, when they get to a problem, they stop and they say, wait a minute, is this a big problem? Does this bother a lot of people in the world? And if the answer is yes, then they do a second thing. They say, is there a better way? They start doing the research to solve this. And then if the answer to that is yes, they do a third thing everybody else doesn't. They say, I'm not leaving until this thing is fixed. So my example of that was when I was in the airport, I went to go see my mentor and I bought an airline ticket. When you have no money, an airline ticket's a lot. And I got to the airport and it was really crowded and the line was really long. And it was so long just to check in back then and get a boarding card. And I waited in that line for an hour and all the woman did was check my ID and give me a boarding card. And I got very upset and I said, this is crazy that you stand in a line for 1 hour for someone to give you a boarding card, which is just a piece of paper and it comes out of a printer. And so I started saying, isn't there some better way to do this? And the woman kept saying, next customer. They didn't listen to me at all. But then I started asking all the people in line. I said, is this a problem for everybody? And all the people in the airport were upset that the line was an hour long. And then I said to myself, okay, I'm in a problem. I'm not going to go home. I'm going to try to fix this problem that everyone's complaining about. And I said, is there a better way to do it? So that week, I started my first startup. And today, when you go to airports around the world and you check yourself in at a kiosk, that was my first product. I created these kiosks, went back to the airport and said, how about this? You guys buy kiosks and let customers check themselves in at airports. And then we were able to sell them around the world because I solved the problem that I saw instead of coming up with a product and hoping people liked it. A couple quick other examples. A friend of mine, Lars, who used to get lost all the time. Lars is from Denmark, Danish. One day sitting in his car where he couldn't fold a map, he got frustrated and said, how many people are lost somewhere in the world right now? And the answer was everybody. And maps were paper then. And he said, is there a better way to do this? And he was staring at the sky because he was lost. And he said, wait a minute, there's satellites in the sky. They can see me. I can tell them, they can tell me where I am. I can tell them where I want to go. So Lars created Google Maps, not Google. Google bought this technology from my friend for nearly $1 billion because he solved the problem he was sitting in. So I want to stop there, Susan and Carlos, and let's take some questions. But I just wanted us all to think about that for, for today's lesson anyway, which is next time you find yourself complaining about a real problem in the world, stop and say, is this what I should be working on instead of the thing I'm working on now?
So Cesar has a question. What are the main considerations I should have when going into other countries? So this is national, international,
Absolutely.
regional expansion.
Absolutely. So I'll give you a few, and it's very much dependent on the type of product you have. But for example, in many cases, if your product, which most everything does these days, is tech-based, one of the things you have to look at are data and privacy laws. There are different rules in different countries on how you have to handle credit card information when people pay for your product if they pay online. There were some countries that we just skipped. We said, oh, we'll come back to them because the credit card privacy requirement was so difficult that it was slowing down our whole business to try to meet the requirements of one country. So data privacy, how you protect somebody's personal data, especially credit cards, is different by countries. And you have to study it before you get into the countries. Then, of course, there's the language issue. There were some countries, it takes time and effort to translate your product and your service into different languages. And the question is, how many more customers are added by that different language? I'll give you a funny example. In India, there are 1,100 different dialects of the language. There's a joke in India. One time I said, I don't understand what they're saying. And they said, wait 10 minutes and the language will change anyway. Looking at dialects and languages, luckily English is prevalent there. And so you're attacking the native language for you, if it's English, whatever it is. If it's, in Latin America, Hispanic, if it's in Eastern Europe, it might be a Russian dialect, but picking the countries that already speak the language you're in first, that also leads to culture. A lot of times there are cultural issues about the type of product, the type of service, the way you position it. So I used to buy a book on every country, study the culture as well as the language before I ever launched a business. Then there are business laws. In some countries, you are required to have a corporation in that country. For example, I think it may not still be this case, but like in Japan, you had to open a Japanese company. Your company could not do business in Japan. You had to have a Japanese company. In some countries, you have to have a partner, a joint venture partner in that country. So you have to check the business registration laws of doing business in that country. Then, I swear I'm almost done, then you have labor and hiring laws. Some countries make you hire their local talent versus sending your people to that country to open it. And if that's the case, you need to understand the labor laws. In one country we went to, I won't name it, but one country we went to, this is a startup. We hired 2 employees. One of them did no work the entire first month, basically. So we called him over and we said, we're gonna have to let you go. And he was smiling. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, in our country, when you fire somebody, terminate their employment, you have to give them 13 months of salary. I said, what? He said, you have to pay them a whole year plus 1 month's vacation. I said, you only worked here 30 days. He said, you should have studied the laws before you came to work. And I said, I can't afford to do that. He said, well, then we'll talk to a lawyer. So if I had known the labor laws of that country, I would have never hired people there until maybe someday later. Those are all the kinds of things you need to study. Now, I'm going to tell you that may sound difficult, but here's the good news. There are organizations like Jen, there are people that know all that already. There are people on this call that have launched companies in all these countries. So the advantage you have that I didn't was I had to figure all that stuff out myself, but you have all these people that Susan and Carlos are connecting you to right now on this call, in that chat and in our networks and in the organization you're part of that already know how to do all that. You should be reaching out to each other in this organization. That's why Jen exists, because someone can help you do that that's already been through it.
And I think that's one of the best things about Entrepreneurship World Cup. I mean, as we talked about last week, everybody came into it thinking they're applying for a competition. But what ends up happening because of the discussion board on the platform, because of these webinars, because of this community that you're now part of, you can find partners and collaborators and people who can help you test and understand the market better throughout this competition. And if you do make it to the EWC finals, those 100 teams, they're competing, but my gosh, the partnerships and collaborations that have happened because they came into it understanding these are some of the best startups in the world. They can learn from each other, they can work together, and it's been an incredible outcome of this. So we're really excited to make sure that you see the big picture of this. We're glad to have you learn from people like Jeff and be on a webinar, but these are all little pieces of you making sure your EWC journey is a success, which is about your business, not just winning. So,
Hey, Susan,
yeah, please.
Somebody asked me the other day about applying to EWC and said, am I applying for a competition? I said, you're applying to a cooperation because the competition is almost while it's exciting, it's what you just said. That was not the coolest part. The coolest part was connecting with people like you all over the world and sharing ideas. And we did that online. And then the ones that, came to the event, you know that we didn't want to leave because there was so much sharing of ideas and partnerships and intelligence and just new friendships. So EWC was just an absolutely amazing opportunity to grow your network. And, your network is so very much a part of your ability to succeed.
And not just, and I think you made a really important point. If you were lucky enough to get to the end, those top 100, that was great. But I'm sure, as we're all seeing now, the virtual networking that happened for the months beforehand, my gosh, some of those relationships were solidified because they were on a chat together, maybe in a cohort for the accelerator part, but they really bonded. And so be open to that. And I'll tell you, the other